September 19th, 1944, near the village of Arracourt in eastern France. Hauptmann Klaus Becker of the 113th Panzer Brigade lowered his binoculars as fog rolled across the morning fields. Through breaks in the mist, he observed something that contradicted everything German tactical doctrine taught about infantry movement. American half-tracks, dozens of them, were maneuvering across open ground at speeds no Wehrmacht unit could match. The vehicles carried squads of armoured infantry, who would dismount and establish defensive positions before his panzers could coordinate an effective attack. By the time German forces advanced through the fog, American infantry had already deployed with supporting weapons, turning what should have been a surprise assault into a costly frontal attack against prepared positions. Becker's after-action report, preserved in German military archives, noted with frustration that American infantry arrived faster than German armour could manoeuvre. This was not the infantry warfare German officers had trained for. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed attacking infantry would move on foot at walking speed, providing defenders time to identify threats and concentrate fires. American mechanized infantry eliminated these assumptions. They appeared where German commanders didn't expect them, deployed faster than defenders could respond, and disappeared before counterattacks developed. For German forces accustomed to the plodding pace of their own horse-drawn logistics, the speed and flexibility of American armoured infantry represented a fundamental shift in how modern infantry fought. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The vehicle that transformed American infantry tactics was the M3 half-track, a hybrid machine combining truck mobility with tracked cross-country capability. Standardized in 1940 and manufactured by three American companies, White Motor Company, Autocar, and Diamond T, the M3 represented American industrial pragmatism. Rather than designing a specialized military vehicle from scratch, engineers adapted commercial truck components to create a machine that could be produced quickly in enormous quantities. The M3 measured 20 feet long and 7 feet wide. It weighed just over 8.5 tons, fully loaded, and carried 13 men, including the driver. Power came from a White 160AX six-cylinder gasoline engine, producing 148 horsepower, enough to propel the vehicle at 45 miles per hour on roads. A 60-gallon fuel tank provided a range of 220 miles. The front wheels steered like a conventional truck, while continuous tracks at the rear provided traction across terrain that would bog wheeled vehicles. Armour protection was minimal, 6 mm on the sides and 12 mm at the front. This thin steel stopped small arms fire and shell fragments, but nothing larger. The vehicle had no roof, leaving occupants exposed to artillery airbursts and aerial attack. 2 side doors and a rear door provided entry and exit. Early models mounted a 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun on a pintle mount behind the front seats. The improved M3A1 adopted an elevated armoured pulpit mount for the 50 caliber gun, with additional mounts for 30 caliber machine guns along the passenger compartment sides. American soldiers initially despised half-tracks. They called them Purple Heart Boxes, a grim reference to the medal awarded for combat wounds. Complaints centered on vulnerability. The open top provided no protection from artillery shells bursting overhead. The thin armour couldn't stop machine gun fire from close range. A single anti-tank round would kill everyone aboard. Infantry riding in half-tracks felt like targets, not protected soldiers. Yet, despite this unpopularity, half-tracks fundamentally changed how American armoured divisions fought. The United States Army had entered World War II with infantry that moved on foot or in unarmoured trucks. Standard infantry divisions marched at the pace soldiers could walk, roughly 3 miles per hour in combat conditions. When tanks broke through enemy lines and raced ahead, infantry couldn't keep pace. Tank units advancing without infantry support became vulnerable to anti-tank guns and infantry with magnetic mines. The gap between tank mobility and infantry mobility created tactical problems that American commanders needed to solve. The solution emerged from observing German panzer divisions during the French campaign of 1940. German forces combined tanks with panzer grenadier infantry mounted in SD KFZ 251 half-tracks. These mechanized infantry units could follow tanks across rough terrain, dismount to clear obstacles, and remount to continue the advance. The integration of mobile infantry with tank formations enabled the rapid breakthroughs that characterized German blitzkrieg tactics. American planners studying these operations recognized that mechanized infantry wasn't just desirable, it was essential for modern armored warfare. In July 1940, the Army established the Armored Force at Fort Knox, Kentucky, to develop doctrine and organization for armored units. One critical decision shaped everything that followed. Each armored division would include both tank battalions and armored infantry battalions, equipped with half-tracks, creating balanced combined arms teams that could fight together. Production of half-tracks began in May 1941. Initial deliveries equipped provisional units forming at training centers. By December 1941, when the United States entered the war, roughly 1,000 half-tracks had been produced. This number would explode as American industry mobilized. Between 1941 and 1944, American manufacturers produced over 41,000 half-tracks of all variants, making the M3 series among the most numerous armored vehicles of the war. The organizational structure placed half-tracks at the center of armored infantry operations. A standard armored rifle company received 20 half-tracks. 3 went to company headquarters, serving as command vehicle, maintenance transport, and ambulance. The company's 3 rifle platoons received 5 half-tracks each. These carried the platoon headquarters, 3 12-man rifle squads, a 60mm mortar squad, and a light machine gun squad. The company's anti-tank platoon used 3 additional half-tracks. This allocation meant every infantry squad in an armored division had its own dedicated vehicle. The tactical concept was straightforward. Half-tracks would transport infantry to the front lines, where soldiers would dismount and fight on foot. The vehicles provided mobility, not combat platforms. American doctrine explicitly stated that armored infantry normally fought dismounted. Half-tracks were to drop troops near objectives, not charge directly into enemy fire. The machine guns mounted on half-tracks were for suppressing enemy positions during dismount operations and for local security, not for conducting assaults from the vehicles. This distinction between transport and combat platform proved critical. German panzer grenadiers sometimes fought from their half-tracks during rapid breakthroughs, accepting high casualties to maintain momentum. American doctrine was more cautious. Infantry would ride half-tracks to battle, dismount at a safe distance from the objective, fight on foot to seize the position, then remount to continue the advance. The half-track's value lay in tactical mobility, allowing infantry to redeploy quickly as battles developed. Reality in combat often diverged from doctrine. Initial American use of half-tracks in North Africa during Operation Torch in November 1942 revealed serious problems. Inexperienced troops attempted to use half-tracks for missions beyond their capabilities. Some units tried to employ them as assault vehicles, charging directly at German positions. The results were catastrophic. German 37mm anti-tank guns, considered obsolete against tanks, proved devastatingly effective against thin-skinned half-tracks. A single hit would penetrate the armor, ignite ammunition, and kill everyone aboard. General Omar Bradley, commanding American ground forces during the North African campaign, later assessed half-track performance with measured judgment. He described the M3 as a competent and dependable contrivance, whose bad reputation resulted from the inexperience of troops who attempted to use it for too many things. This evaluation captured a fundamental truth. The half-track was excellent at its designed mission, transporting infantry, but terrible when misused as an assault vehicle or light tank. By 1943, when American forces fought in Sicily and Italy, tactics had evolved. Infantry learned to use half-tracks properly, dismounting before reaching enemy positions and using the vehicles for fire support from concealed positions. Reports from Italy praised half-track performance when employed according to doctrine. The vehicles proved reliable mechanically, handled rough terrain effectively, and provided the tactical mobility that kept infantry units synchronized with tank advances. The refinement of tactics continued through 1944 as American armored divisions prepared for the invasion of France. Training emphasized combined arms coordination. Tank and infantry units practiced working together, with tanks suppressing enemy positions while half-tracks delivered infantry to assault positions. Infantry learned to dismount quickly under fire, something that required practice and discipline. Drivers and vehicle commanders practiced rapid repositioning to avoid becoming stationary targets. On June 6, 1944, American armored divisions landed in Normandy as part of Operation Overlord. The massive invasion involved 156,000 troops in the first wave, supported by nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft. Among the equipment brought ashore were thousands of half-tracks. By the end of June, Allied forces had unloaded 170,000 vehicles through temporary Mulberry harbours and directly across the beaches. Half-tracks formed a substantial portion of this mechanised force. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The initial weeks in Normandy tested half-track crews under the most difficult conditions. The Norman bocage, a landscape of small fields enclosed by thick hedgerows, favoured defenders and negated mobility advantages. German forces exploited these natural obstacles to create a grinding battle of attrition that threatened to replicate World War I's static warfare. American infantry, whether riding half-tracks or moving on foot, faced the same challenge. The dense hedgerows broke up formations, limited visibility to a few dozen yards, and turned every field into a potential killing zone. Operation Cobra, launched July 25, 1944, finally shattered German defensive lines west of St. Lo. Following massive carpet bombing by Allied air forces, American infantry and armoured units burst through German positions and swept into open French countryside. The subsequent advance occurred at speeds that surprised even Allied commanders. General George Patton's Third Army became operational August 1st and immediately began rapid advances that would characterize the pursuit across France. This was the moment when American half-tracks demonstrated their true value. In open terrain, with German forces retreating, the ability to rapidly redeploy, infantry became decisive. American armored divisions organized into combat commands, flexible task forces combining tank battalions, armored infantry battalions, and supporting artillery. These combat commands could advance 50 miles in a day, something no previous army had sustained. The tactical pattern repeated across France through August and September. American tank units would identify German defensive positions. Artillery would bombard these positions while tanks maneuvered to flanking positions. Half-tracks carrying armored infantry would advance behind the tanks, using the armor as mobile cover. When tanks suppressed enemy fire, half-tracks would close to within 200 or 300 yards of the objective. Infantry would dismount under the covering fire of vehicle-mounted machine guns and assault the position on foot. This combined arms choreography occurred so rapidly that German defenders struggled to respond. Traditional defensive doctrine assumed hours between when defenders first observed attacking infantry and when those infantry closed to assault range. American mechanization compressed this timeline to minutes. By the time German units identified the threat, called for artillery support, and attempted to reinforce threatened positions, American infantry had already seized the objective and prepared to repel counterattacks. For Wehrmacht officers observing these operations, the speed of American infantry redeployment seemed almost impossible. German Panzer Grenadier units, considered elite mechanized infantry, rarely achieved similar operational tempo. Part of this disparity reflected vehicle availability. A typical German infantry division in France during 1944 included approximately 50 motorized vehicles and 1,500 horse-drawn wagons pulled by 4,000 to 6,000 horses. Even elite panzer divisions never had enough half-tracks to mount all their infantry. German industry had produced approximately 15,000 SDKFZ, 251 half-tracks between 1939 and 1945, far fewer than American production. Moreover, German half-tracks served throughout the Wehrmacht, spread across dozens of divisions on multiple fronts. In contrast, American half-tracks concentrated in armoured divisions where they could achieve maximum tactical effect. A single American armored division in 1944 operated over 400 half-tracks, more than an entire German Panzer Corps. This numerical superiority in vehicles translated to tactical advantages that German commanders found frustrating. American armored divisions could conduct sustained operations without pausing for infantry to march forward. When one combat command became exhausted, another could pass through and continue the advance. Infantry casualties could be quickly reinforced because reserve troops rode to the front in vehicles rather than marching for hours. Ammunition and supplies moved forward on the same half-tracks that brought infantry, ensuring units remained logistically supported. The organizational structure amplified these advantages. American armored divisions in the 1943 organization included 3 tank battalions and 3 armored infantry battalions, creating a balanced force where infantry could always support tanks and vice versa. Each armored infantry battalion operated roughly 60 half-tracks, enough to transport the entire battalion simultaneously. This meant American commanders could commit an entire battalion to battle within minutes of identifying an opportunity, something German commanders with mixed foot and motorized infantry could rarely achieve. German forces attempting to defend against these operations faced an unsolvable problem. If they concentrated forces to block American advances, American commanders would identify the strong points, fix them with one combat command, and maneuver another combat command around the flanks using superior mobility. If German forces spread out to defend broader frontages, American units would concentrate overwhelming force at weak points, break through, and exploit deep into German rear areas before reserves could respond. Major General Maurice Rose, commanding 3rd Armored Division, perfected these tactics during the pursuit across France. Rose, a meticulous officer who had studied armored warfare extensively, understood that speed and flexibility were more valuable than raw firepower. His division advanced in multiple columns, each built around tank and half-track mounted infantry working together. When one column encountered resistance, another would already be maneuvering to attack from a different direction. The German response revealed how thoroughly American mechanization had disrupted traditional defensive planning. Wehrmacht officers recognized they couldn't match American mobility with their horse-drawn logistics. Instead, they attempted to exploit half-track vulnerabilities by establishing anti-tank gun ambushes along likely American routes of advance. German doctrine emphasized that a single well-positioned anti-tank gun could destroy multiple half-tracks, potentially stopping an entire American advance. These tactics achieved some success when American units advanced carelessly. Half-tracks moving in column along roads made excellent targets for German 75mm and 88mm anti-tank guns firing from concealed positions. A single ambush could destroy several vehicles and kill dozens of infantry before survivors could react. Yet these tactical victories rarely translated to operational success because American forces simply had too many half-tracks. Units that suffered losses received replacement vehicles within days, something German forces with limited production could never match. The industrial foundation underlying American half-track operations was something German military planners had fundamentally misunderstood. Before the war, German intelligence had assessed American industrial capacity as impressive but not decisive. German analysts recognized that American factories could outproduce German industry in absolute terms, but calculated that American production would focus on supplying Britain and the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease, leaving insufficient capacity to field large American armies in Europe. This assessment proved catastrophically wrong. American industry produced enough equipment to supply the United States Army, the United States Marine Corps, substantial British and Commonwealth forces, Soviet armies, Free French units, and numerous other allies simultaneously. The scale of this production exceeded anything German planners had considered possible. Between 1941 and 1945, American factories produced over 41,000 half-tracks, roughly 3 times total German half-track production. Moreover, American half-tracks benefited from industrial standardization that German production never achieved. The M3 used commercial truck components wherever possible. The White 160AX engine was a proven commercial design. Transmission, axles, and suspension components came from existing truck production lines. This meant spare parts were readily available, repairs were straightforward, and any mechanic trained on commercial trucks could service military half-tracks. German half-tracks, by contrast, used specialized components that required dedicated production facilities. The SD-KFZ 251's interleaved road wheel suspension, while providing excellent cross-country performance, proved complex to maintain and vulnerable to mud and ice jamming between wheels. German half-tracks used diesel engines that required different maintenance procedures than the gasoline engines in most German trucks. This specialization meant German half-track units needed specially trained mechanics and dedicated spare parts, both increasingly scarce as the war progressed. The maintenance burden of German half-tracks grew severe by 1944. Units operating in France reported that mechanical breakdowns removed more half-tracks from service than combat losses. Spare parts shortages meant disabled vehicles sat awaiting repairs for weeks. In contrast, American half-track units maintained high operational readiness because replacement parts arrived continuously through efficient logistics networks. An American armored division could typically keep 90% of its half-tracks operational, while German panzer divisions struggled to maintain 50% readiness. The psychological impact on German forces of facing continuously mobile American infantry extended beyond tactical frustration to fundamental doubts about Wehrmacht capabilities. German officers who had spent careers studying infantry tactics found their expertise suddenly obsolete. Traditional calculations about how long infantry needed to redeploy, how quickly reserves could reinforce threatened sectors, and how much time defenders had to prepare positions all became meaningless when facing mechanized opponents who moved at speeds German doctrine never anticipated. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzergrenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, experienced this reality firsthand during fighting in Normandy and later during the retreat across France. Von Luck, a veteran of campaigns in Poland, France, North Africa, and Russia, understood mechanized warfare as well as any German officer. Yet even he struggled to counter American armored infantry tactics. In his post-war memoirs, he described the challenge of defending against opponents who could concentrate overwhelming force at any point within minutes, then disappear before German artillery could respond. The speed differential between American and German infantry redeployment was measured not in percentages but in orders of magnitude. A German infantry battalion moving on foot required 4 to 6 hours to march 10 miles, arrive exhausted, and prepare defensive positions. The same movement consumed fuel, required rest stops, and left soldiers too tired to fight effectively immediately upon arrival. An American armored infantry battalion could cover the same distance in 30 minutes, arrive fresh, and deploy for combat immediately. This mobility advantage compounded across multiple movements. During a typical day of operations, an American armored infantry battalion might redeploy 3 or 4 times, responding to changing tactical situations. Each movement took minutes rather than hours. German infantry units moving on foot could redeploy perhaps once daily, and only if commanders planned movements many hours in advance. The cumulative effect was that American units could conduct 10 times as many tactical maneuvers as German opponents in the same time period. The operational implications shaped every engagement. When American reconnaissance identified a weak point in German defenses, commanders could mass combat power at that location within an hour. By the time German reserves arrived hours later, American forces had already broken through and advanced miles beyond the breach. Traditional defensive doctrine, which assumed defenders could reinforce threatened sectors faster than attackers could exploit breakthroughs, simply didn't function against opponents with such overwhelming mobility advantages. German attempts to counter American mechanized infantry revealed how thoroughly the Wehrmacht had fallen behind in tactical innovation. Some units tried establishing multiple defensive lines, calculating that even if Americans broke through the first line, subsequent lines would delay the advance. This failed because American half-tracks could bypass strong points, leaving infantry to reduce them while tanks and additional infantry continued advancing. The speed of American operations meant that by the time German reserves counterattacked the breakthrough point, American forces had already penetrated so deep that counterattacks hit empty air. Other German units attempted mobile defense, trading space for time while looking for opportunities to counterattack American flanks. This proved equally ineffective because American armored divisions advanced on such broad frontages that German forces rarely found exposed flanks to attack. When they did, American units could redeploy infantry so quickly that what appeared to be vulnerable flanks became heavily defended positions within minutes. The flexibility that half-tracks provided meant American commanders could respond to German maneuvers faster than German commanders could execute those maneuvers. The cumulative effect of these tactical defeats eroded German confidence in their ability to conduct effective defensive operations. Soldiers who had believed in Wehrmacht superiority found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by opponents they had been taught to consider inferior. The Nazi propaganda that portrayed Americans as soft, unmilitary, and incapable of serious warfare collided with the reality of highly mobile, well-coordinated, and aggressively led American units that advanced faster than German forces could retreat. For German soldiers captured during the fighting in France, time spent in prisoner-of-war camps provided opportunities to observe American military operations from a different perspective. These prisoners saw the logistics infrastructure supporting American combat operations, the replacement systems that kept units at full strength, and the training programs that produced competent soldiers in remarkable numbers. What they observed challenged every assumption about American military capability. General Major Wilhelm von Bittrich, commanding the 2nd SS Panzer Corps during Operation Market Garden in September 1944, was captured after the war's end and extensively interrogated about his observations of American forces. Von Bittrich, despite his SS affiliation, was considered a competent tactical commander who understood mechanized warfare. His assessments of American capabilities, preserved in Allied intelligence documents, reveal grudging respect mixed with frustration. Von Bittrich noted that American armored divisions possessed organizational advantages that German forces could no longer match. The integration of tank, infantry, artillery, and engineer battalions into flexible combat commands created balanced combined arms teams that could accomplish missions German forces required entire corps to achieve. The key enabler, he recognized, was transportation. American infantry rode to battle, German infantry walked. This single difference compounded across thousands of engagements to create insurmountable operational disparities. The industrial foundation supporting American half-track operations became clearer to German prisoners who witnessed the scale of American logistics. Maintenance facilities at prisoner-of-war camps operated fleets of vehicles for transporting prisoners, supplies, and personnel. These facilities, mere administrative backwaters far from combat zones, operated more vehicles than many German combat divisions. The casual abundance of transportation in American rear areas revealed the vast disparity in industrial capacity. German officers familiar with Wehrmacht logistics recognized that the United States had solved problems that crippled German operations. Spare parts for American vehicles arrived continuously and in quantity. When vehicles wore out, they were simply replaced rather than laboriously repaired. Fuel supplies never ran short. Tires, the critical component that had immobilized so many German units, were treated as disposable items replaced on regular schedules, rather than precious resources patched until they disintegrated. The psychological realization that Germany faced opponents with effectively unlimited resources proved devastating to German morale. Soldiers who believed they were fighting for survival against enemies bent on destroying Germany discovered they faced opponents who could afford to be wasteful. American units that lost half-tracks in combat received replacements within days. German units that lost irreplaceable equipment fought on with dwindling strength until they ceased to exist as effective fighting forces. By September 1944, the gap between American and German capabilities had grown so wide that German commanders struggled to devise tactics that could achieve even temporary success. The Battle of Arracourt, fought from September 18th through September 29th near the town of Arracourt in Lorraine, demonstrated this disparity with brutal clarity. German 5th Panzer Army launched a counter-offensive with 262 tanks and assault guns, anticipating quick defeat of defending American forces. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division, the defending American force, operated approximately 100 tanks supported by armored infantry mounted in half-tracks, German planners expected numerical superiority and the heavy armor of Panther tanks to offset American advantages in mobility and coordination. The battle proved these expectations wrong. Over 11 days of fighting, American forces destroyed or disabled over 200 German armored vehicles, while losing fewer than 30 tanks. The key to American success was the flexible integration of tanks, infantry, and artillery into coordinated teams. When German armor advanced, American half-tracks rapidly repositioned infantry with anti-tank weapons to flanking positions. While German tanks engaged American armor frontally, infantry teams armed with bazookas attacked German flanks and rear armor. The speed with which American infantry could redeploy meant German commanders faced threats from multiple directions simultaneously, something their tactical training hadn't prepared them for. German tank crews, many with only 2 weeks of training, struggled to coordinate with supporting infantry that moved too slowly to keep pace with armor. German half-tracks, present in insufficient numbers, couldn't transport enough infantry to secure flanks or clear American positions. The result was armored units advancing without adequate infantry support, exactly the vulnerability American combined arms doctrine was designed to exploit. American half-tracks ensured that wherever American tanks went, infantry followed immediately, providing the mutual support that made combined arms tactics effective. The fog that shrouded Arracourt during the battle favored neither side equally. German commanders assumed poor visibility would protect advancing armor from American air attack and artillery observation. This proved partially correct, but the same fog that hid German movements also prevented German reconnaissance from identifying American positions. German armor advanced blindly into carefully prepared defensive positions where American infantry with anti-tank weapons waited in ambush. American half-tracks proved their value during this confused fighting. When American commanders identified German penetrations, they could rapidly move infantry to block or counterattack. The speed of American response meant that German breakthroughs that should have created tactical crises became opportunities for American counterstrokes. Half-track mounted infantry would race to threatened sectors, dismount, establish hasty defensive positions, and engage German armor before it could exploit initial success. This flexibility transformed American defense from static position, holding to dynamic repositioning that kept German forces off balance. The aftermath of Arracourt left 5th Panzer Army shattered, having lost the majority of its armored strength for negligible gains. German commanders conducting after-action analysis identified multiple failures in coordination, reconnaissance, and tactical execution. Yet, underlying all these immediate causes was a fundamental disparity in mobility. American forces could move faster, respond quicker, and concentrate force more rapidly than German opponents. The half-tracks that transported American infantry were not the only cause of this advantage, but they were essential enablers that made American tactical flexibility possible. As autumn 1944 progressed into winter, American advances slowed due to supply constraints rather than German resistance. The rapid pursuit across France had outrun logistics networks, creating fuel and ammunition shortages that forced operational pauses. Yet, even during these pauses, American half-tracks demonstrated their value. Units could be quickly repositioned to respond to German counterattacks. Reserves could be moved to threatened sectors in hours rather than days. The operational flexibility that half-tracks provided meant American commanders maintained initiative even when they couldn't advance. The German Ardennes offensive in December 1944, known to Americans as the Battle of the Bulge, represented Germany's final attempt to achieve strategic success in the West. Hitler's plan called for rapid armoured thrusts through the Ardennes forest to reach Antwerp, splitting Allied armies and forcing negotiations. The operation assumed that dense forest terrain would limit American mobility advantages and that winter weather would ground Allied air forces. Both assumptions proved partially correct, yet the offensive ultimately failed due to factors that included American infantry mobility. When German forces achieved initial breakthroughs, American commanders rapidly moved reserves to contain the penetrations. The 101st Airborne Division's defense of Bastogne became legendary, but what made that defense possible was the speed with which the division reached the threatened town. Normally, an airborne unit moved on foot or in commandeered trucks, but attachment to armoured divisions provided access to half-tracks that transported the division to Bastogne in record time. The paratroopers who held Bastogne arrived aboard half-tracks from units across the American sector, demonstrating how thoroughly mechanization had transformed American infantry mobility. The German offensive ground to a halt within days, stopped not primarily by American counterattacks, but by logistics failures that left German armour immobilized for want of fuel. The bitter irony was that German planners had calculated captured American fuel dumps would supply advancing German units. American half-track drivers, displaying initiative and courage, evacuated these dumps ahead of the German advance, denying Hitler's panzers the fuel they desperately needed. These drivers, many of them operating independently in chaotic conditions, demonstrated competence and dedication that German propaganda claimed Americans lacked. By January 1945, the bulge had been reduced, and American forces resumed offensive operations toward Germany. The final months of the war in Europe saw American armoured divisions exploiting their mobility advantages to achieve advances that would have seemed impossible years earlier. Entire German armies were encircled and destroyed because they couldn't move fast enough to escape American envelopments. The speed of American operations, enabled by half-tracks and other vehicles, exceeded German capacity to respond. The statistics of American half-track production and employment reveal the scale of mechanization that transformed American infantry. Between 1941 and 1944, American industry produced 41,000 half-tracks of all variants. These vehicles equipped 16 American armored divisions, plus separate battalions, and provided through Lend-Lease to British, French, Soviet, and other Allied forces. The concentration of vehicles in American armored divisions meant these formations operated with mobility that no German division could match. Each American armored division in the 1944 organization operated approximately 500 half-tracks across its tank battalions, armored infantry battalions, and supporting units. This meant a single American armored division possessed more half-tracks than multiple German panzer divisions combined. The numerical superiority in vehicles translated directly to tactical advantages that German commanders found impossible to counter. American units could be everywhere. German units could only be in one place at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.